The Human Cycle by Sri Aurobindo. Chapter 16. The Suprarational Ultimate of Life. No doubt all is still moving, however touched by dim lights from above, on a lower, half-rational, half-infrational level, clumsily, coarsely, in ignorance of itself, and as yet with little nobility of motive. All is being worked out very crudely by the confused clash of life forces and the guidance of ideas that are half-lights of the intellect, and the means proposed are too mechanical and the aims too material. They miss the truth that the outer life result can only endure if it is founded on inner realities. But so life in the past has moved always, and must at first move. For life organizes itself at first round the ego motive, and the instinct of ego expansion is the earliest means by which men have come into contact with each other. The struggle for possession has been the first crude means towards union, the aggressive assertion of the smaller self, the first step towards a growth into the larger self. All has been, therefore, a half-ordered confusion of the struggle for life corrected by the need and instinct of association, a struggle of individuals, clans, tribes, parties, nations, ideas, civilizations, cultures, ideals, religions, each affirming itself, each compelled into contact, association, strife with the others. For while nature imposes the ego as a veil behind which she labors out the individual manifestation of the spirit, she also puts a compulsion on it to grow in being until it can at last expand or merge into a larger self in which it meets, harmonizes with itself, comprehends in its own consciousness, becomes one with the rest of existence. To assist in this growth, life nature throws up in itself ego enlarging, ego exceeding, even ego destroying instincts and movements which combat and correct the smaller self-affirming instincts and movements. She enforces on her human instrument impulses of love, sympathy, self-denial, self-effacement, self-sacrifice, altruism, the drive towards universality in mind and heart and life, glimmerings of an obscure unanism that has not yet found thoroughly its own truth light and motive power. Because of this obscurity, these powers, unable to affirm their own absolute, to take the lead or dominate, obliged to compromise with the demands of the ego, even to become themselves a form of egoism, are impotent also to bring harmony and transformation to life. Instead of peace, they seem to bring rather a sword, for they increase the number and tension of conflict of the unreconciled forces, ideas, impulses, of which the individual human consciousness and the life of the collectivity are the arena. The ideal and practical reason of man labors to find amidst all this the right law of life and action. It strives by a rule of moderation and accommodation, by selection and rejection, or by the dominance of some chosen ideas or powers, to reduce things to harmony, to do consciously what nature, through natural selection and instinct, has achieved in her animal kinds, an automatically ordered and settled form and norm of their existence. But the order, the structure arrived at by the reason, is always partial, precarious, and temporary. It is disturbed by a pull from below and a pull from above. For these powers that life throws up to help towards the growth into a larger self, a wider being, are already reflections of something that is beyond reason, seeds of the spiritual, the absolute. There is the pressure on human life of an infinite, which will not allow it to rest too long in any formulation, not at least until it has delivered out of itself that which shall be its own self-exceeding and self-fulfillment. This process of life, through a first obscure and confused effort of self-finding, is the inevitable result of its beginnings, for life has begun from an involution of the spiritual truth of things, in what seems to be its opposite. Spiritual experience tells us that there is a reality which supports and pervades all things as the cosmic self and spirit, can be discovered by the individual even here in the terrestrial embodiment as his own self and spirit, and is at its summits and in its essence an infinite and eternal self-existent being, consciousness, and bliss of existence. But what we seem to see as the source and beginning of the material universe is just the contrary. It wears to us the aspect of a void, an infinite non-existence, an indeterminate inconscient, an insensitive, blissless zero, out of which everything has yet to come. When it begins to move, evolve, create, it puts on the appearance of an inconscient energy, which delivers existence out of the void in the form of an infinitesimal fragmentation, the electron, or perhaps some still more impalpable minute unit, a not yet discovered, hardly discoverable infinitesimal. Then the atom, the molecule, and out of this fragmentation builds up a formed and concrete universe in the void of its infinite. Yet we see that this unconscious energy does at every step the works of a vast and minute intelligence, fixing and combining every possible device to prepare, manage, and work out the paradox and miracle of matter, and the awakening of a life and a spirit in matter. Existence grows out of the void. Consciousness emerges and increases out of the inconscient. An ascending urge towards pleasure, happiness, delight, divine bliss, and ecstasy is inexplicably born out of an insensitive nihil. These phenomena already betray the truth, which we discover when we grow aware in our depths, that the inconscient is only a mask, and within it is the Upanishads, quote, conscient in unconscious things, end quote. In the beginning, says the Veda, was the ocean of inconscience, and out of it that one arose into birth by his greatness, by the might of his self-manifesting energy. But the inconscient, if a mask, is an effective mask of the spirit. It imposes on the evolving life and soul the law of a difficult emergence. Life and consciousness, no less than matter, obey in their first appearance the law of fragmentation. Life organizes itself physically round the plasm, the cell, psychologically round the small, separative, fragmentary ego. Consciousness itself has to concentrate its small beginnings in a poor surface formation and hide behind the veil of this limited surface existence the depths and infinities of its own being. It has to grow slowly in an external formulation till it is ready to break the crust between this petty outer figure of ourselves, which we think to be the whole, and the concealed self within us. Even the spiritual being seems to obey this law of fragmentation and manifest as a unit in the whole, a spark of itself that evolves into an individual psyche. It is this little ego, this fragmented consciousness, this concealed soul spark on which is imposed the task of meeting and striving with the forces of the universe, entering into contact with all that seems to it not itself, increasing under the pressure of inner and outer nature, till it can become one with all existence. It has to grow into self-knowledge and world knowledge, to get within itself and discover that it is a spiritual being, to get outside of itself and discover its larger truth as the cosmic individual, to get beyond itself and know and live in some supreme being, consciousness, and bliss of existence. For this immense task, it is equipped only with the instruments of its original ignorance. Its limited being is the cause of all the difficulty, discord, struggle, division that mars life. The limitation of its consciousness, unable to dominate or assimilate the contexts of the universal energy, is the cause of all its suffering, pain, and sorrow. Its limited power of consciousness, formulated in an ignorant will, unable to grasp or follow the right law of its life and action, is the cause of all its error, wrongdoing, and evil. There is no other true cause, for all apparent causes are themselves circumstance and result of this original sin of the being. Only when it rises and widens out of this limited separative consciousness into the oneness of the liberated spirit can it escape from these results of its growth out of the inconscience. If we see this as the truth behind life, we can understand at once why it has had to follow its present curve of ignorant self-formulation. But also we see what through it all it is obscurely seeking, trying to grasp and form, feeling out for in its own higher impulses and deepest motives, and why these are in it useless, perturbing, and chimerical, if it were only an animal product of inconscient nature. These urgings towards self-discovery, mastery, unity, freedom from its lower self, spiritual release, evolving out of its first involved condition in matter and in plant life, effecting a first imperfect, organized consciousness in the animal, it arrives in man, the mental being, at the possibility of a conscious evolution, which will bring it to its goal, and at a certain stage of his development, it wakes in him the overmastering impulse to pass on from mental to spiritual being. Life cannot arrive at its secret ultimates by following its first infrarational motive forces of instinct and desire. For all here is a groping and seeking without finding, a field of brief satisfactions stamped with the inconscient seal of insufficiency and impermanence. But neither can human reason give it what it searches after, for reason can only establish half-lights and a provisional order. Therefore, with man as he is, the upward urge in life cannot rest satisfied always. Its evolutionary impulse cannot stop short at this transitional term, this half-achievement. It has to aim at a higher scale of consciousness, deliver out of life and mind something that is still latent and inchoate. The ultimates of life are spiritual, and only in the full light of the liberated self and spirit can it achieve them. That full light is not intellect or reason, but a knowledge by inner unity and identity, which is the native self-light of the fully developed spiritual consciousness, and preparing that, on the way to it, a knowledge by intimate inner contact with the truth of things and beings, which is intuitive and born of a secret oneness. Life seeks for self-knowledge. It is only by the light of the Spirit that it can find it. It seeks for a luminous guidance and mastery of its own movements. It is only when it finds within itself this inner self and spirit, and by it, or in obedience to it, governs its own steps, that it can have the illumined will it needs and the unerring leadership. For it is so only that the blind certitudes of the instincts and the speculative hypotheses and theories and the experimental and inferential certitudes of reason can be replaced by the seeing spiritual certitudes. Life seeks the fulfillment of its instincts of love and sympathy, its yearnings after accord and union. But these are crossed by opposing instincts, and it is only the spiritual consciousness with its realized, abiding oneness that can abolish these oppositions. Life seeks for full growth of being, but it can attain to it only when the limited being has found in itself its own inmost soul of existence, and around it its own widest self of cosmic consciousness, by which it can feel the world and all being in itself and as itself. Life seeks for power. It is only the power of the Spirit and the power of this conscious oneness that can give it mastery of itself and its world. It seeks for pleasure, happiness, bliss, but the infrarational forms of these things are stricken with imperfection, fragmentariness, impermanence, and the impact of their opposites. Moreover, infrarational life still bears some stamp of the inconscient in an underlying insensitiveness, a dullness of fiber, a weakness of vibratory response. It cannot attain to true happiness or bliss, and what it can obtain of pleasure, it cannot support for long, or bear, or keep any extreme intensity of these things. Only the Spirit has the secret of an unmixed and abiding happiness or ecstasy, is capable of a firm tenseness of vibrant response to it, can achieve and justify a spiritual pleasure or joy of life as one form of the infinite and universal delight of being. Life seeks a harmonious fulfillment of all its powers, now divided and in conflict, all its possibilities, parts, members. It is only in the consciousness of the one self and spirit that is found. For there they arrive at their full truth and their perfect agreement in the light of the integral self-existence. There is, then, a suprarational ultimate of life, no less than a suprarational truth, good, and beauty. The endeavor to reach it is the spiritual meaning of this seeking and striving life nature.